All right. Good morning and welcome to the show. This is the Weekly Jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And today, Rohi, we have some local updates that we'd like to go over. But I'll let you go ahead and start off since you are very informed here in Madera. So give us the latest updates.
I know for both of us, the passing of Max Rodriguez, former county supervisor, I know the community is going to feel that one. A longtime advocate for the community and just passing the last week. So,
no, definitely. I think Max, leader here in the community, has been known prior to his service on the County Board of Supervisor. He was an insurance agent, and a lot of people did know him, so did a lot of service.
Yeah.
So our prayers and our condolences definitely go out to his family.
Yeah.
I know, especially in this hard time. We're with you, and again, those condolences. We'll certainly look forward to the services. I believe those services have been out. There is something that we can put up later on our site here. So if you're interested in attending those services, they do have those times and dates.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any memories that you have of Mr. Rodriguez by any chance?
You know what? The interactions I have, I remember him. The personality was definitely welcoming. I felt like, as far as somebody as an elected official, it was somebody that you felt like you could talk to. Wasn't cold-faced or straight to the point kind of guy. It was more of a human in a sense of when you're talking to him. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, even though we share the same last name, there was never really a doubt that we were never related, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, occasionally,
but you're hoping to have another Rodriguez on there.
Occasionally, you would see. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Occasionally, you would hear, "Are you related to Max?" And maybe that name did carry some weight for me when I was out there campaigning and canvassing, because people did know Max, especially more so in his district. I believe that's District 4.
Yeah.
When I got the news, it was like a shocker. I still didn't think that was something that could happen to someone that looked so young,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I didn't know his age, to be honest with you, because it wasn't until 2020 that he served his last term there at the County Board of Supervisors.
Yeah.
Early on in my campaigning, I know Max was a figure already in the community, and some of my camp would ask me, "You need to go see Max. You need to go see Max. Sit down, talk to him." And sure enough, he was very welcoming. Gave me an opportunity also, had endorsed me on several occasions, and I did the same for him as well. Not only was he a true leader in our community, he fought for the high-speed rail. I know there was talks at some point that maybe a future station would be named after Max. I hope that that's still the case. He was a very big proponent of the high-speed rail. And to this day, I mean, you still see it. People can certainly argue about it, agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But I think the jobs that are brought around our community were more important to the late supervisor. But anyhow, I just wanted to share some of those memories, because I know he left an impact here for sure. And we'll look forward to attending those services.
Yeah.
Now we can kind of segue into some of the other stuff that we have going. Again, our condolences to the Rodriguez family. But Rohi, tell us a little bit something about what you did this past week.
Yeah, so I think we got to enjoy a nice trip to Sacramento for League of Cities, and for a lot of those aren't aware. I mean, League of Cities it's a organization that just I know they have the County League of Cities, and this is where the City League of Cities or California League of Cities. So it's it brings about all the different mayors and city council and city managers from the state, and it's kind of nice because you get to mingle with some of them and hear a lot of their ideas and get a lot of talks in, and definitely an interesting event. So.
Yeah, well over 400 cities in the state of California, and a lot of these they belong to this association, or they call it the California League of Cities, where they're advocating for our cities, of course, and they're spread in different divisions, or they're broken up in different divisions, right? We're the South San Joaquin, where we had an opportunity to meet with our representative and also some of our colleagues that are within that South San Joaquin. Had an opportunity to meet with our assembly member, Soria, that made an appearance and also kind of answered some questions. A lot of us here in the Valley, when we advocate for certain things that are going around our city, certain laws, then we always want to make sure that we speak to our state legislators to let them know to support our letters or support our efforts in trying to pass, especially local control, right? That's probably the bigger thing is cities advocate for local control. And it was good to see, again, these sessions that broke up talked about our water, talked about governance, talked about, we had different sessions that break up. And along Rohi and I, also our city manager, which is great because you want him to kind of get caught up on what's taking place, what's happening in other cities, what can we bring from this session to our community that can help us, economically or help us with governance and what have you.
Yeah.
But we also had our esteemed colleagues, Anita Evans and Artemio Villegas, that attended, and Elsa Mejia. So it was good to kind of see the council being engaged in just trying to learn a bit more so we can bring that back to our community. Any
Yeah, I mean,
additional comments?
I think the one, I know you and I had a good long discussion was, the one relating to the water. And I mean, it couldn't come at a better time because obviously last Tuesday we had probably one of the bigger storms, especially of the year, if not, I don't know how long. It sounds like we got quite a few inches of rain. And then here we are thrown into a topic about water storage and, and what's California's plan going forward to kind of, help safeguard one of our biggest assets that we have to have,
Yes, and I think one of the panelists there was a big advocate for the Sites Reservoir. And I don't know if I had an opportunity to mention this here, Rohi, but 2 weeks ago I took a state water trip. And that water trip kind of started at the Oroville Dam in Sacramento, made its way to Sites Reservoir, down to Sacramento River, over to San Luis Reservoir, and then we ended up in Pyramid Lake. But I had an opportunity to really see how our state water project is at work, right? And part of that is that Sites Reservoir is when we have these rains like we've had, we need to learn how to capture that for flood control. But a lot of the times we don't have enough dams. So this is a proposed reservoir out by the city of Maxwell where you would store so many million acre feet, right? And that would help alleviate some of the issues that we have. But I mean, I thought it was a good proposal. Obviously, you and I have had talks. Why is it that when we have these extreme rains, why don't we allow that water to come through the Fresno River? Why are we not seeing that water, kind of run through the Fresno River so that it can percolate and recharge our basin? And I think that was one of the questions that you were pondering on and asking over and over.
Well, I mean, I want to say from without, I mean, I know you have a little bit bigger oversight because you've been doing this a little bit longer, but when you look at or listen to the talk, with this project, and I think it was like, how many billions, was it $6 billion or something for that reservoir, and how it's been dragging in years, and it goes up in cost. It brings about the discussion, with regards to water storage on the state level. I can see where a project like that, if you trust those managing the resource, it's necessary. But when you look at and you say Madera and our need for capturing our own water, you kind of, I want to say it gets into almost a feeling of war in a sense of there's only so much water that's going to come down in California, right? And everybody's going to battle for ownership or control of that water. And it just seems like Madera should be on the forefront of saying, hey, our water came down in our area. How do we retain it first? Whatever we have left, you can have to yourself. But, what is ours is ours. And that's where, you start looking at, like, now we have basins that are required. And, when you build a project, a lot of it for flood mitigation, but also for the percolation, you have to build these measures in. And you hear how much it costs to just dig a hole. I mean, I want to call it that. A basin is simply just a hole, maybe some piping, because obviously you got to get the water into that hole. But then you look at a giant resource like the Fresno River, which is already there, and it can probably store an abundance. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of more water in that resource versus these little tiny basins we build. in my discussion, or my point with that was to say, you know, it seems like if Fresno River is underutilized because it has no water. I mean, there maybe a few times a year when they do their I think they drain it to help with percolation and, you know, in some of the flood control stuff, but most of the year it's empty. It seems like Madera could advocate to say, hey, can we utilize that as a storage facility, even just to slow the water down a little bit and allow that percolation during these times, and you know, not have to keep building some of these basins that, you know, maybe are costly, you know. So that was kind of really just the angle that, or the discussion that I was trying to engage in is, you know, I know you had talked about like the water is kind of accounted for, right? And it's kind of, you know, it's already on the books as belonging to somebody. And, you know, and that's the kind of part where, I mean, I know for me, it gets a little rough because it's like, if it's in Madera, it's my water.
Yeah,
You know?
no, and you know, Rohi, I appreciate that because I think that's one thing I think the city maybe didn't foresee back in the days is that, hey, we were going to have these off patterns with climate, right? I mean, people may not like the word climate
Yeah,
change, but I mean,
yeah.
climate change is just cycles,
Yeah,
right?
it's cycles,
you know,
yeah.
the earth goes through some cycles, and we're going to have some wet years, we're going to have some dry years, right?
Yeah.
And that climate change, as of recent or in the last decade or two, has really caused some issues here in Madera. And we never thought that we run out of water because we're strictly groundwater, and that's the important thing to highlight is that as folks that depend on groundwater, then we want to make sure that there's groundwater storage. And I think when we look at, you know, it was funny. Somebody would tell me that years back, someone could come down to Madera, especially on the west side of Madera, and could dig anywhere between 6 to 20 feet, and you'd hit water. And that may be the case nowadays. You're talking certainly in 100 feet, and sometimes in certain cases you may have to go down even further to try to reach good water. And you've seen over the last couple of years how water has been an issue, especially on the east side, more so on the southeast side. We're talking Parkwood area and stuff like that. I think we're now connecting our water system for them. But again, it's because these wells, after a while, I mean, water depletes, and you have these issues with subsidence. And to your point, whenever we have the biggest reservoirs that we have, Rohi, from what I'm understanding, and the complexities of water is going to be your snow, right? This is the biggest storage of water that we have, right? So when it snows up in the Sierras, it stays there for a long time. But as it gets warmer, like we've had these periods in March where we were reaching 90 degrees, well, that just melts the snow a lot faster. So it doesn't gradually store it. It comes down rushing.
Yeah.
And when it comes down rushing, then where do we store this, right? And that Sites Reservoir is exactly for that. It's when
Yeah.
we have these high flows, then we can channel some of that water into this reservoir so that we can save it or store it and then slowly release it wherever the demand is, right?
Yeah.
And with the State Water Project, I think they've noticed that it's not just the 4.8 million people that surround the 8 counties around the San Joaquin Valley. You're talking about 27 million people that this water is delivered to, and through this state project. So then you have Southern California with the majority of population. So they have a really big interest in making sure that they get their water from different sources. And this is not the only source. They get water from the Colorado River. They get water from other southern channels out there. But the State Water Project also delivers a good portion of their water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in my concern with a lot of that, though, is, you know, looking at one of the names that I think is lasting in California, and it's Enron. And Enron attempted to do the exact same thing. Privatize, though, the trading and buying and selling of water in water banks. And the only difference between what Enron is doing and what the state of California wants to do is we want to trust that California is going to look in the best interest. But yet, you know, a lot of our talks, it wasn't California. You have still these interest groups that are making
Funding.
decisions and making
Yes,
funding.
yes.
And so, you know, as Madera not being a very rich, you know, city, it brings concern because that means when water, again, is controlled by specific entities like that, it's always to the highest bidder. It's the reason why most of our water flows away from us and goes to cities like Los Angeles and some of these bigger, higher paying people. And you sit there and you just watch it go down the river and you say, well, that's our water. Yeah, but they're willing to pay more. Say goodbye to it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like I said, that's where, you know, you want to trust, but you don't want to trust, because you want to say, I don't care that they pay more. The water needs to be where it needs to be. We have a loss. You know, our water table is depleting. It's not like they were saying how where you could poke a hole apparently in Madera and water was at your foot. You know, how we're going hundreds of feet now into the ground before we find water. But that's where I have the concern is, like, it's been tried before, and you want to trust that humanity is going to do the best interest for everyone, but it's always going to go to the highest paying dollar.
Yeah,
You know?
and you know, to some extent, I mean, you look at who's got the money to really put these massive projects, right? And whenever you want to bring in a dam, or you want to bring in, whether it's Temperance Flats or it's this other Delta Conveyance project that they have going, then who, or Sites Reservoir,
Yeah.
right? Who's going to fork out the bill to do that, right? Who has? I mean, if Madera, the city of Madera, for example, had
Yeah.
some rights, and we could say we're going to build this dam. But you still have to go out and get rights. You still have to get a right to that water. You have to apply for it. And the complexity of water rights, Rohi, it's crazy. I mean, these date back before the 1900s, and after the 1900s, there's adjudication rights, riparian rights. There's different types of rights with water. And, you know, earlier I wasn't trying to circumvent the question
Sure.
about why the Fresno River. But again, like I said, some of that water that's up in Millerton Lake, it falls down from somewhere, different lakes, right? It goes to different lakes, it comes down, and it's stored there. But it's stored there and it's spoken for because under the Bureau of Reclamations, that there has two different people. The Friant Dam has your Madera irrigation, and then you got the Friant Kern. And these are two channels of water that come downstream through Madera Canal. They deliver surface water to ag and other sources. They generate power as they're doing that. And then also the Friant Kern goes out south, and they're also providing that water to the south, you know, Tulare, Kern counties, and then it probably makes its way up to the south. But, you know, prior to, you know, let's just say the big gold rush out here, you know, when they looked at California, they didn't really see this ag huge, you know, opportunity at that time, because water was around these river sources. But whenever the state water project came about, it allowed us to start pushing water to the westlands where a lot of the fertile soil was. So they had to create some channels of how do I deliver water? And the majority of water, believe it or not, 2/3 of it comes from the Sacramento River. So it's up north. So you'll always have this constant fight saying, hey, why are you taking our water? Well, again, this is where the majority of this water comes from, is from the Sacramento River up by the Feather River, stored in the Oroville Dam.
Yeah.
And this is how our project works. Now, why the Fresno River is not is because, again, if that water is already spoken for, then how would
So
you...
I guess I would in the complexity of it, I would say, so I can understand the water that's coming mountains and whatever in all parts of the state and coming down and through, but right now Madera, we pump our water out of city-owned wells, municipal wells.
Correct.
It goes to my sink,
Correct.
my toilet. I flush it. So that was our water. It was in our ground. It comes through. I've used it. It goes out to our wastewater treatment plant, where it will reside forever. And that was kind of my point is, I know like you say, like even that water is somewhat, it's spoken for, but it seems like we need to get to a point that says we have this water that needs to somehow put back into the system over here where we're pumping out, not kept, you know, miles outside of the city. It needs to come back some way and somehow either feed into basins or a storage of some kind here to percolate back down, but then also come back with the rain that we get on a regular basis. Like you have to have that, I mean, we have to have almost a positive in our water source, right?
Yeah.
And we should, because we've depleted out of the earth, okay, minus evaporation and whatever kind of happens to get to the water treatment plant and clean and process, but there's a certain amount of water that they retain, of gallons of water, that if it comes back in this direction, and I know we've talked about like purple pipe and somehow that coming back, but it seems like that should be the forefront of saying, look, there's the water and it's clean. So putting it back in and letting it percolate here, plus the rain that we get on a normal basis, which is already ours, should expedite like that lifting of that water table. Because my understanding is that the water table at the wastewater treatment plant is like it used to be, where it's very high because there's just an abundance of water being stored there.
Yeah,
You know?
and a lot of that, Rohi, has to do with, you know, you may see it as a way of recharge, right? Because that's what we're doing. If
Yeah,
you purple pipe
exactly.
it, I don't think that's a problem. In paper, we get certain credits for recharging, right? But the city itself doesn't really, it's not the biggest consumer of water. It's the surrounding agriculture that does. Now,
Yeah.
this is nothing to go against agriculture.
No, it's not a
but
blame
we have,
game,
we,
no.
you said it best. It's like these banks, right? So if you're taking a lot of water and you're not replenishing it, then you're going to have a deficit. And this is why the state created Sigma, is because over the decades, and wherever you want to place blame, whether it's the state or it's the ag, whatever, I mean, this is a constant fight that you hear is Sigma was in place so that we can protect our aquifers after seeing what was taking place with subsidence, right? Maybe there was just too much land with a huge demand of groundwater. And essentially, I mean, you just imagine this way. You have thousands of straws and these radiuses, you know, whether it's certain square miles, and they're all sucking that aquifer, right? So that water stored in between sand and dirt and what have you, right? So as soon as you take that out, then you leave this void, you leave this empty space. So then this land starts subsiding or collapsing on itself, and essentially it starts sinking in areas where you may see 20 feet, 30 feet.
Sure.
And these areas become a problem. Where now, if you go closer to the Sacramento Delta, you start seeing areas, or you start seeing areas that are below sea level, and the only thing that's holding them back are levees. So around here, we are sucking water at a rate, it's nominal rate, but nevertheless, we're having to dig deeper because we are competing with other bigger straws, right? And that's going to cost the ratepayer more money, because whatever the cost is to deliver water at your house, your toilet, or your sink is going to be spread around all these ratepayers. And sometimes, Roy, I think we have to look at it as a bigger picture. How do we work together so that cities like ours, 65,000 plus folks can get water and fresh water, clean water, right? Because if we're having to compete for that water, then there's a problem. And this is where Sigma comes in. Our plan was to how do we balance in 2040? What do we have to do? What actions do we have? Well, the city's done everything it can, from conservation to creating more reservoirs, working with MID. You know, and there's areas that a county has a challenge. The county has a challenge because there's wide areas where you don't have surface water that MID delivers to.
Yeah.
So then they're strictly dependent on groundwater. And those folks have to make a living too. They're in it for profit. They're in it for whatever reason. So their only source of water is to go to the ground.
Yeah.
But that ground again depletes our aquifer, and that's where the deficit has. So the counties they have to make a tough decision on either letting these folks know, hey, you either have to fallow land or you got to take other different measures to be able to make this happen. And that's the big fight, is like, well, wait a minute. Why do we have to why do we have to give up our water while Sacramento is flushing all this water down to the ocean? And you hear that quite often. And I had to ask that question, because coming from the valley, I too say, why is it that we're releasing so much water? And there's this thing called salinity intrusion, right? As the ocean, the tides come in, you know, water is being pushed inland. So these rivers that flow, they have to flow at a certain rate so that they can push out that salinity. And it's crazy as it is. There is a balance.
Yeah.
There is a balance. I mean, you definitely could capture a lot more of that water. But again, that goes to these projects, and who's willing to fork out the money, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I know when it comes to like the coastal areas, you know, everybody's argument is always desalination, and you know, you have the largest body of water at your fingertips, which is the ocean. All you got to do is take the salt out and clean it up. Why are we pumping, you know, all the way from the Sierra Nevadas to LA to give you water when it's right there, you know? And I know there's cost, and there's all this that goes into how much it takes to clean up the ocean water to make it available. My point is just looking at if Madera is in its own bubble, we've pumped the water out, we've already used it, and it's almost like the oil thing, like, knowing that oil can be cleaned and reused, the recycling of it, it's being done, but the reusing of it is where the bottleneck comes in. And I get it, the stigma of purple pipe, and it was once my poop, and now I want to drink it. The stigma is there, but I think purple pipe or something along that line is aiding back in the percolation of the water back here. You don't got to drink it. Use it for your lawn. Use it for whatever. Pump it into a basin. You know what I mean? Like those we should be keeping those to a certain level, almost like our lakes. But then eventually, after however long that percolation takes to get back into our water table should replenish. And maybe we get to a point of balance to where, we really don't have to pump that much back to bring those water tables up. But it just seems like something that if, water has to be at the forefront, because if our wells run dry, we don't have a city. And I think that's the bigger thing to look at is we can only function until the water goes dry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because nobody's going to come to our aid, and no one's going to say, hey, we'll give you something, because the water is already spoken for. So.
And the way I look at it, Rohi, is no different than any business, right? If you have a business and you foresee some economic distress in the future, then you've done your job in creating a reserve balance so that when, these times do come, you can operate, or you have a line of credit, whatever the case, but you have some lifeline to help you go through it. Well, water is the same thing. Mm-hmm. So for us, I think we're trying to do here at the city anything partnership again. I've been an advocate of surface water treatment plants to some extent, right? Yeah. But I mean, it costs a lot of money. So right now, I think it's cheaper to recharge and make sure that, like you said, keep those banks full, and then we can just pump that water out when we need it in the future, right? Well, it sounds good in theory, but if your depleting water tables are going down, then that theory is busted, because essentially you're doing everything you can to try to keep that end of the agreement, but it's everybody else that has to play with you, because you're sharing this big, I'd like to call it a big, huge underground lake, right? And it's just the way. How do we play fair? So we have to be assertive in saying, well, what can we do as a city to make sure that our basin, or at least within our surrounding, we're recharging in a very positive way, but also something that gives us that future generation hope that water will be there. Yeah. To your point, businesses, if you don't have water, then you can't succeed. And I think it's definitely at the forefront, and it's something that we should be talking about more and more. So I'd like to hopefully bring to the show, I'd like to bring maybe the MID director out here. I've asked Tommy, and I'll ask him again. I'd like for him to kind of give us his view and his insight of what he sees if we don't really move on to these plans that were sanctioned by the state with the SGMA, and we're doing what we can. And just recently, we've accepted the domestic well mitigation plan that we had to do. This is for folks that have wells that are running dry out in the county or within the city proximity. We have to fork out some money to make sure that they have an opportunity. But more importantly, Roy, I agree with you. Water is very complex. I think I'm glad that I have a colleague that's interested in water, because it's going to get more and more important as the future comes.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a similar conversation like we had with our roads, is how much rain would actually have to come down on Madera over what period of time to even bring our water table to an existing amount. And I don't think beyond having the flood of Noah that Madera is ever going to be at a point where we say I can poke a hole in the ground and water is going to pop out, unless we change something, and that's what I'm saying is the shock when I found out how we pump our water out, we send it to the treatment plant, and it's now stuck miles outside of the city and never comes back. I always had this, for some reason, mentality like, we clean the water because we're going to reuse it in some fashion as a city, and so that's why that disconnect of finding and understanding of why it doesn't come back, but it just doesn't seem as an acceptable answer just to say, like you said, like money, like who's going to pay for it. I know we had that part of our discussion, like, okay, you're going to have to raise rates, you're going to have to do this. Maybe initially, but projects like this, they're always sold just like solar. I had to spend money to put my solar in, but it's going to save me money somehow down the road. And I think water can be sold in the same way, in the sense of you're paying so much for water right now because of the cost it takes to bring it to your doorstep. But if we implement plans like this where our tables get better and water becomes more abundant, it seems obvious that our water cost should go down because it's easier to deliver that water.
And that's a tricky conversation to have, because as it is, if you go ask any resident in the city of Madera, they'll tell you, are you paying too much for your water? Of course, they're going to say yes, right?
Yeah.
And not too long ago when we had these tiered rates, I think people were just, they were up in arms saying, hey, this isn't right. You can't have this. But that study that we had was, to your point, we were forecasting that if we didn't do this today, the pain would be worse.
Correct.
If we kicked the can down the road.
Yeah.
So I think we took it upon ourselves and saying, hey, we have to implement something, especially if we're going to deal with our water and sewer and what have you, right? And for decades, I think, that can was kicked down the road. Nobody wanted to have that conversation and to the resident say, hey, we need you to pay up a little bit more for the water. Well, why am I going to pay? You need to pay. Well, yes, we can pay, but we have an enterprise fund, and that fund is the cost of trying to get you the water and deliver the water. I have to spread that over the ratepayers.
Yeah.
Now, you had brought a good point earlier about the desal, but like the Metropolitan Water District, for example, they look at desal and they look at water through the Delta, and they, whatever is going to be cheapest for them, because they're a wholesaler, they're gonna take again, as a wholesaler, you're not gonna take water at $1,000 an acre foot versus $250 an acre foot, because it doesn't make sense. Whenever you're formatting a business, then you're going to know what route is cheaper for me. Yes, this is a big, huge project that I can save for sometime in the future if it's the last resort, but I still have this other channel, and I can do better, deliver water more efficiently, and this way it doesn't cost money to bring it out there, right? They have to look at it that way. So these investors, even LA at some point, this guy Mulholland, if you've read his story, or I forget the name of the movie, it's called I don't know if it's the Chinaman but this gentleman here was a self-made engineer, digging ditches, but he understood that, hey, water is going to be so important. So he was commissioned to bring water from the Owens Valley into LA, and they invested a lot of money in some of these tunnels and stuff from the Colorado River as well. Millions and millions of dollars that people voted on at that time to bond for that project. And look at it now. It paid off because they were able to, that's what made Los Angeles. Los Angeles was a small, at some point, 100,000. And now you're looking at millions and millions of people there. But the reason why you could expand is because of water.
Yeah.
So I think, to your point, water is life for us here in Madera. And we'll continue to talk about this. I'd like to bring more experts of water into our show so that they can give us their insight of what we can do.
Okay.
I know that's enough about water. We definitely we can certainly talk about it a bit more.
Yeah.
But if there's anything else, we're running into 33 minutes now of our show. But any other important highlights that we want to showcase aside from our League of Cities? We do have our economic summit that's taking place here at the Madera Municipal Golf Course. If you're interested in knowing how the county's doing economically, this would be a good way to do that. Rohi and myself will be making our way out there.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add, Rohi?
No, I'm just excited. I mean, it's always nice to hear, I think, as some of the bigger projects like the casino gets closer to completion, it sounds like the world is going to be that maybe that's our explosive moment for the city of Madera for some of these projects that are kind of ready to go, but wanting to see that. Yeah,
right?
They're ready in anticipation of that project opening. So I hope, maybe the next couple of months as we come back to these, it'll be more updates about the new stuff that's, breaking ground and coming to Madera. So
yeah, and then what that means is we do have our Village D, and we're hoping that gets underway also, because that's 10,000 units. We do have a school that's being built. That's King Hussein School. So we start seeing some positive momentum. Yeah. As soon as schools get built, all of a sudden you see development around that. So we look forward to the city having a prosperous up and coming years, and we'll learn about that today at our EDC Summit. So with that, Roy, I think that's all we have. We look forward to talking to you next week, and hopefully we have a guest here but we'll certainly bring someone here with water expertise to give us some insight